Audio sync. Hey friends, Robert Ham here with roberthamphotography.com. We're outside again, and you know what that means. It's time for another check out my camera. So you are in the right place if you're interested in learning about the Olympus 35 DC camera. Yes, this camera right here, and I've got a nice little flash attached to the top of it. We'll kind of talk about that accessory as well here in just a minute because it's very important. The Olympus 35 DC is a camera in the Rangefinder Deluxe, or the Rangefinder system of cameras that Olympus made. This came back out in 1971, and the nice part about it is that it's special because it's a very point and shoot powerful style of camera. And when you think about film cameras today, we think about cameras that we have a lot of manual controls. So many times this beautiful Olympus 35 DC gets left out in the dust. But that wasn't the case when it was developed, and it shouldn't be the case today, and I'm here to tell you why. I think there's about 3 direct reasons, and I'm going to get into those in just a second. But before we do, let's take this flash off and go ahead and talk about the camera and give you a real quick look around. First of all, the camera itself is a completely automatic camera. You have very little manual control, if any. Looking at the front, you see a 6 element lens arranged in 4 groups at 1.7 and 40 millimeters. That's our lens right there, a beautiful lens. Because of the system and the way that it is, it's also a leaf shutter, and that means, guess what? That it can sync with flash up to many different speeds. The fastest shutter setting that this camera will use is actually 1/500th of a setting, 1/500th of a second, I should say, which is pretty great. And in its automatic mode, it can go all the way down to f1.7 at the nice little 15 seconds. So you can have a 15-second exposure up to a 1/500th of a second, ranging anywhere between f1.7 all the way up to f16. Now that's pretty great. We're going to talk about that some more in a second. Looking at the top, we're just going to go ahead and see that we've got our rewind or our film advance lever. We've got a threaded shutter release. We've got our film counter and a guide number for the flash. This unit takes anywhere between a guide number of 10 all the way up to 40, and that's in meters, which is really great. Most people don't even remember that. It's 10 meters, you know, all the way up to 40 meters, which is like 130 feet-ish. So the flash that can compensate for a flash in the camera with the electronics programmed inside and make for an excellent, properly exposed and balanced image. You see the hot shoe, which is nice. We're going to talk about the hot shoe and how we set some of the flash settings with the hot shoe. And then we've got, of course, our rewind lever. You do not open the camera by pulling this. You actually open the camera down here with this little tab, which pulls down, and then the back of the camera will open. So unlike many 35mm film cameras where the rewind lever actually opens up the film case, no, there's a little ledge right here. And the film actually loads upside down. That brings us to the next part. This is the only manual control you would have over the camera, and it's backlight compensation, and it will compensate for a backlit subject up to 1.5 EV, or evaluation settings, which is, or exposure values. And what does that mean? Like, we don't use EVs today so much. Well, back in the day, EVs were really big to use, and we'll talk about that here in a second. I want to finish the walk around. On this side, you won't find anything except your lugs, but right here's where you're going to set the flash. You can set it between electronic flash, you can set it between bulb mode, and in that different setting right there, you'll have the ability to plug in a PC sync socket if you need one. Now, the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to try to give you a look through the viewfinder real quick, so if you can see, yeah, I want to show you that down there, and I want to show you something real important. Okay, when you look down in this viewfinder, I'm trying to give you the big, nice view. That yellow box in the center, which might be moving left and right, that's actually where the rangefinder focus happens. And because of the rangefinder focusing, Olympus did something special with these cameras. They gave you the ability to focus past infinity and focus closer than its minimum focus distance. Now, this thing focuses from 2.8 feet all the way out to 15 feet, which is where you're going to find the majority of your focusing range. And then anything after 15 feet is infinity. So being able to actually move past infinity slightly is great because it allows you to pick up additional detail, or allows you to just adjust just in case you know, your focus is a little bit off on the camera, or the rangefinder is kind of set just a little bit weird. I mean, the camera's 45 years old, for goodness sakes. So Olympus was really thinking forwards, or had some forwards thinking going with this kind of a design. Also, the same token goes for when you're focusing close to your macro side, to your 2.8 feet, the ability to focus just a little bit past it allows you to gain access to a hyperfocal distance. So you can kind of just get a little bit closer, but more importantly for what it's for, is for being able to maintain focus accuracy throughout the actual lifetime of the camera. Now, Olympus designed this camera, like I said, back in the day, 1971, and today this camera is still going strong. Now we're hitting the 5-minute mark. Most of you guys have checked out before now, and that's too bad because you're gonna miss the best part. But if you haven't, you're getting ready for an absolute treat. We were talking about the EV range real quick, and let me show you that again by going right up here. And this is kind of tough. This does take a battery which is no longer produced, and so I use a couple different small batteries in it. But when you're looking through there, when I depress the shutter release button, you should see it's going all the way to f16 right there at 1/500th of a second. If you can see that, great. I might get a little closer so you can see it again. Bingo. Now, that's when I'm just depressing the shutter button. What this is doing is this camera has a set of predisposed apertures and shutter speed values programmed into it, and it's great. It actually comes with the little book. You can download the manual, or if you're lucky enough to have one, it tells you what the camera is going to use. And this camera is based on the EV, or exposure value system, rather than what we think of today as just f-stops and shutter speeds and things like that. Those are actually all the same, except the light meter reads exposure values and your camera reads the light meter. So today when you look through it, it's easier just to adjust the exposure by moving your aperture or setting your shutter speed or changing your ISO, because it's all digital, so we have access to that. But the reality is the light meter that your camera is reading is actually reading a set of variables, and it's coming up with a number, maybe between 5 all the way to 17 or 20 or whatever. And those numbers are important. And what it means is that a light value of 15 or 16 is something like today, right now. Bright, sunny, hard lights, no overcast sky, hard shadows with defined edges. And your camera would read that, or this camera in that case, would read that as an exposure value of 15, generally speaking, 15, 15.5, something like that. And what that would mean is that you as a photographer, if you were using a light meter and reading the light meter, you would see an EV of 15.5. You'd have to do some thinking inside of your brain. You'd have to think, I'm using ISO 800. Okay, so 800, the Sunny 16 rule for shooting outdoors to give me a properly exposed image at ISO 800 would mean f16, 1/800th of a second, and an aperture of f16. That's what I would have to do. So that's gonna be about a light value of 15. But wait a minute, what if you didn't have 16, or what if you wanted to use a more shallow depth of field? So what if you wanted to use, instead of 16, what if you wanted to use 11? Well, then you couldn't change your ISO from 800, so you'd have to change your shutter speed from 1/800th of a second, say closer to 1,000, to 1/2000th of a second. Well, that also would be a recipe to give you a proper exposure with a light value of 15. So we've just looked at the Sunny 16 rule, and we've said how we would do it using 800 speed film. And then if we wanted to go from f16 to f11 for a slightly shallower depth of field, we would have to up our reciprocal value for the shutter speed. Great, easy, right? No, it's tough. I mean, we have to think about that today. We're spoiled. So the camera itself thinks differently, and it thinks in exposure values, and that's what you're seeing when you look through here. And the reason that that's important, let's get this back up in here, is because when I push that button down, you don't have to think about all that. But now watch, I'm gonna push the backlight compensation button on the back, and we should see a different result. Unfortunately, we don't see a different result, and that has to do with the fact that it's so bright outside right now. But generally speaking, the backlight compensation button will actually change your exposure value by 1.5 EV of a stop. Now, if it was a little bit darker, I've actually recorded a couple of these outdoors, and last night when I was recording, it was a little darker. We were actually able to see the difference. So you could look through the viewfinder and you could see. It may actually have to do with me, f16. Okay, let's. Nah, no. Yeah, no, it's not helping much right now, and that's because it's so bright. However, that's the way that it should work. Even if I can't demonstrate it for you right now, sorry, call it a fail and move on. Now, earlier you saw a flash on this camera, and that's important because you'd say, oh, the design looked great, it was wonderful. I'll make sure that the flash is set up right. Go ahead and put it on. The flash is now on. Go ahead, you might even be able to hear that. The flash is turning on. Go ahead, cock the camera, and then we're gonna take a picture of you guys just as soon as my flash stops flashing. And maybe you can see. Okay, didn't go. There we go. Now you should be able to see. Good. Let's see if we get it a little bit more powerful real quick. Okay, right there. I'm trying to make sure There you go. You guys got that one. I'm trying to make sure that you can see how my flash is working. Right? It takes a little bit of a recharge because my batteries are going sour. There you go. The reason that this is important is because, once again, these standards that we use today in our digital photography actually came from someplace, and it came from real film photography. You see, this flash is the EFX20 designed by Fuji. So I tricked you, didn't I? This flash is the flash that's designed to actually be used on a modern day digital camera like my X100S right there, or my X Pro 1, or even the XT1. But look at the design language that Fuji used with this flash. Where do you think Fuji got their inspiration? Why do you think photographers that love to shoot film love to shoot Fuji? It comes from a very specific spot. It comes from the fact that Fuji got this idea of this camera from looking at what worked great in the past. And don't forget, Fuji used to make film cameras. Fujika, they did it themselves. Now my camera strap came off. We're gonna round this out. We're at 10-minute mark, and most of you have checked out. Those that haven't, go ahead and hit the hashtag I shoot film over on Instagram and follow me over there too. I want to share with you just a couple other things about the camera that I like and don't like. The first one is a bit fiddly. Okay, changing your film speed from which you have ISO 25 all the way up to 800, of course it was called ASA, is a little bit tough. You have to actually zoom the lens all the way out, or focus it all the way out, and then grab the inner ring right there. And as you can see, if you accidentally grab the lens, it will begin to compress and extend, which isn't too much fun. Other than that, focusing is easy, controls are simple, and this is the camera that you should take with you if you want to shoot film and you don't know anything about shooting film. Or if you're used to shooting photography, if you're a pro and you just want to shoot film, shoot something fun and special without having to put all your brains into it. I mean, come on. Sometimes as a pro tog, I go out there, I shoot weddings all the time, I shoot family portrait settings. Sometimes I just want to go out and I just want to shoot. I don't want to do a lot of thinking. Guess what? This is the camera I take with me when I do that. The lens is super sharp. It's a completely underrated camera, and it produces excellent images. If you're used to shooting the 35RD, which is this thing's bigger brother, or even the 35SP, which is the OG for all of them, then you will absolutely love this camera when you want to get out and go. Because of the fact that this is kind of underrated, it goes for relatively cheap online. With a clean lubricate and adjust, you can probably find one of these cameras between $50 and $100. You can pick one up for even cheaper than that if you're just on, I don't know, Goodwill or someplace. Go look for this camera. One thing to know, one thing to check for. When you're looking at this camera, you want to make sure that you don't actually have a camera that has a shutter that's been cocked and has been held cocked for a long time. This button right here is important. It is for the release. This shutter is currently cocked. This camera only works with batteries. It can't work. So if you get a camera and you can't cock it, that doesn't mean that the camera's broken. Don't force it. It means that the shutter is actuated. The spring is under tension, and that could kind of suck. That could change your actual settings later on for the actual speeds of the shutter. So that may need to be adjusted. You'll only know that by film testing it. Guys, this camera is an excellent camera. I really enjoy it quite a bit. I hope you do too. I'm Robert Ham with Robert Ham Photography. Go follow me over on Instagram to find out the cool stuff I'm doing with Instax and instant photography right now. This has been a complete look over at the Olympus 35 DC. I love this camera. I hope you do too. And I'll catch you on the flip side. As always, take it easy, my friends.